I am Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susie.
And we're paranormal specialists who live in the most haunted city on earth, Savannah, Georgia. Every day is Halloween in our line of work, so join us as we spin true tales of haunts, murders, and disturbing Savannah history. I'm Madison.
I'm Chris.
And welcome to the most haunted city on earth. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the most haunted city on earth. My name is Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susie.
And I'm Betty Joe.
Betty Joe.
Yep. Not medallion anymore.
Not medallion anymore. And in case JT didn't edit that in, basically...
I am not going to.
Okay, so let me explain why he's not medallion anymore.
Good luck with that.
It's because we just started filming, and apparently the ghosts were not thrilled about JT's choice of name today, so they cut our audio out.
Very weird.
Not mine. They like me.
Yeah.
It's very strange.
Yeah, the ghost just wanted to hear from Chris. That's what Trisha said. Correct.
It's fair. That's fair.
That is fair. But yeah, so that was JT's original choice of name for today was Medallion because he's craving filet mignon is what he said.
That's exactly it. Big, juicy 8-ounce.
Big, juicy 8-ounce.
But now I'm Betty Joe.
Now he's Betty Joe.
And I make killer peanut butter cookies.
Ooh.
Betty Joe makes killer peanut butter cookies?
Absolutely.
Well, what are we doing here? Why don't we got no peanut butter cookies right now?
Yee. You're right. I need to go do it. I need to go bake them.
Exactly.
Yep. I'm from Hattiesburg, Mississippi.
Oh.
There
that is the home of the best peanut butter jelly cookies.
The best ones.
That sounds delicious. Well, we are going to be doing a ghost mail today.
Are we? I thought we were going off on a tangent.
I thought we were going to end right here and go get peanut butter and jelly cookies.
I know, right?
Before we go and do that, we're going to talk about some of y'all's ghost stories.
Oh, yeah.
But before we get into all the stories, a couple quick announcements. First off, so we originally were going to be filming with And That's Why We Drink on August 29th.
Yes.
That is no longer happening. They have a lot going on right now with their new book coming out.
We're postponing it.
We're postponing it.
Yes.
So...
Yeah, they start their tour like in a couple of weeks.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
It is now October 3rd.
Mean
That is
Girls
when
Day.
we are going to be doing it. October 3rd. Yes, so it's still happening. They just hit me up. It was completely out of our control. They just hit me up and they said, "Hey, we just cannot do that day anymore. Can you do October 3rd?" And we were like, "We'll make it happen."
We will make it happen. And so that's when we're going to do it.
Yes.
But nonetheless, we do have a lot of fun stuff coming up anyways. We have some really interesting guests that we'll be bringing onto the show as we roll into spooky season and all that jazz.
Got a really good October lineup.
It's going to be fun. So we're going to be having some really interesting people on the show. So you'll have a lot to look forward to. And otherwise, if you need some more spooky fix for your regular day or week, it's always a good time to become a parajunkie as well.
Always.
Yes, we just got done doing a fix where we read a story that I found on Paranormal Reddit, and we basically dissected it in the way that we would a typical ghost mail, but that is for the parajunkies only. So if you like that kind of stuff, you can join us over on Patreon. But we're also going to have some really cool, new content that's going to be coming out, a little bit of a restructuring as well over on Patreon. So it's going to be a good place to be.
Yeah, come join us. We got candy.
Yes. Also,
well, that doesn't sound creepy at all.
I know. Or peanut butter cookies, apparently.
Peanut butter cookies.
We got peanut butter
Betty
cookies.
Joe's famous peanut butter cookies.
Woo-woo.
Also, there's always room for one more, EO Serenity said.
Yeah, we're live streaming right now for the Parajunkies.
Yes, exactly. We're going to be doing all of that. Also, we have new merch out that was designed by one of our Parajunkies, Elle. It is a drag queen plague doctor doing a death drop with a rat with the scientific name for the Black Plague. Bubonic plague, excuse me.
Well, Black Death.
Black Death.
Plague.
I just combined them. That's fine. It's Monday. That's all good.
That rat sickness.
Not rat sickness. Yeah. But it is really cool shirt. I'm very excited to get mine.
Yes.
So definitely, if you're looking to get a cute little historically funny shirt. Definitely go check that out. And Parajunkies always get a discount as well on all merch.
Yes, I do.
But let's go ahead and get into our ghost mail. So our first one comes from Pam, who is a Parajunkie. So thank you, Pam, for joining us. Pam said, "Hello, I just became a Parajunkie today." And now, mind you, this was a little bit ago.
It was a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, it was a couple weeks ago. So it's not exactly today. But when Pam sent this, it was that day.
She's a seasoned Parajunkie now.
Yes. But Pam said, "Hello, I just became a Parajunkie today. I'm so excited. I have a question I've had for several years.
Ooh.
Our last house had interesting happenings that I always felt were paranormal. I had a feeling that then that it was because of the creek behind our house that was a pretty strong creek, and every year or two would flood into our yard, almost to the house. I didn't know then about the connection between water and spirits, but I just had an instinct that the activity was related to the creek. By the way, this was in Concord, North Carolina, Cabarrus County, and hopefully I pronounced that right. And the creek was Cottle Creek."
Cobble Creek.
That's kind of a cute name for a creek.
Right.
We moved from that house in 2018. We had frequent lights flickering, lights seeming to burn out only to come back on and work again, toys turning on by themselves, which required something like a switch to be moved to turn on, different toys turning on at once, a fluorescent light dimming and brightening back up by itself, a ceiling fan / light turning on and off, and loud banging sounds in the middle of the night. Sounds a little bit like a poltergeist.
That does sound like poltergeist
It sure
activity.
does.
But also the lights would flicker when there was arguing going on. And I had some scary dreams about the house. One included a man / creature roaring in the yard, trying to get in and get my son who has autism.
Gracious.
That is not a poltergeist.
No, that is not. For a couple years, he was afraid to go in his room, but would never tell me why. And now he doesn't remember. I love this house and miss it all the time. My youngest son, 5 years old, passed away inside that house from cancer on hospice. This was not the son with autism, by the way. I think about that house very often and miss those years there. I'm very sorry for your loss, Pam, as well.
Absolutely.
Actually, I have two questions, one about the ceiling fan / light and another about the loud noise. The ceiling fan and light in the master bedroom were controlled by a remote. The remote came with the house. The light and fan randomly turned on and off often. Sometimes it would turn on while we were looking for the remote, which would be under the bed or something. It felt like it was teasing us. Sometimes the fan came on full blast in the middle of the night. We eventually got rid of the remote, and the light and fan stopped doing all of that. My question is, could it be that a spirit may have used the remote because it was an easy way to control the light and fan? After it stopped, when we got rid of the remote, people would say, "See, it was nothing," like the remote was wonky. But I don't think the fact that the activity stopped without the remote rules out the paranormal. My next question has to do with the loud bangs in the night. The sound was so loud, it woke me and my husband up at the same time in the middle of the night, and we would run out to the family room thinking the cats knocked something huge over. And then we'd find the cats were asleep and nothing anywhere had fallen. But
Cats were asleep after a loud bang,
I know,
so they didn't hear it.
that is kind of crazy.
Goodness.
But these were loud sounds. I keep wondering what in the world made the sound. Can a spiritual, non-physical thing cause sound waves that we can hear? Were we hearing something happening in a different dimension? How could we hear a sound that came from nothing that actually happened? And I guess I have a third question. Often I wonder if my pain and grief now are somehow reaching into the past and somehow haunting our family in the past. Could my longing to jump into those days be spiritually reaching into the past and causing the paranormal activity? I think about those days in that house every single day. Thank you so much for reading my story and questions. I hope this wasn't too wordy. I'm happy to have found you guys. Y'all peeps are the best.
Aw, thanks, Pam.
Thanks. Yeah. So, 3 questions. First question, remote control. The way a remote control works is by transmitting a current through the air to the receiver, at which it will do whatever the remote control is powered to do. It is a well-established and believed notion that spirits can manipulate radio waves, infrared rays. They have dominion over our electronics. So the concept of a paranormal entity being able to manipulate the signal from a remote control or imitate the signal of a remote control, that makes perfect sense. That fits fully within our understanding of how spirits are able to communicate or make their presence known. A lot of the devices that we use to speak to spirits, spirit boxes, Oculuses, all of it, sort of depend on the idea that spirits can manipulate radio frequencies, electrical frequencies, all of these things in order to communicate with us. So that fits within it. But so does a faulty remote.
Right.
A faulty remote will send out errant messages to the receiver. A faulty remote can cause all of those problems if you get rid of the remote and it stops. It seems to be a good indication. However, if the spirit primarily spoke in the same infrared electronic impulses that a remote control uses, when you get rid of the remote control, it no longer has the means to control or do what it was doing to communicate. So I always defer to the feeling. What did you feel was happening? What was your emotional interaction with what was happening? If you felt that it was a haunting, it's more than likely a haunting. If you felt that it was somehow a paranormal or spiritual entanglement, your senses don't really lie to us. We constantly say that our senses can be fooled, but our senses are far more delicate than people realize or understand. And you should probably give some credence to that. Some credence to the idea that somewhere inside of our system is this very well-gauged paranormal meter. I call it the heebie-jeebie meter. If your heebie-jeebie meter goes off, it's not a sign of you being a coward or you not having the intellect or anything like that. It just means that something inside you saying, oh, that's weird. That something weird is happening here, and you should honor it. Absolutely. The second question was the loud noise and whether or not it could come from another dimension. Absolutely. Imagine being asleep and dreaming of a loud noise and then waking up because of the loud noise in your dream. That is kind of what you're talking about. Now imagine that you and your partner both hear the loud noise. That means that you might be in tune with the same alternate dimension, alternate place that is making the sound. Can a spirit make a sound? Absolutely. All sound is vibration. It is just a vibration that can be replicated, and that's kind of how voices that you hear work, because they don't have vocal cords, they don't have mouths, they're not able to shape words or put breath through and over your vocal cords to create the words. So what they're doing is they're manipulating vibrations to the point at which they sound like what they want it to sound like. And that is an immense and incredible feat of energy. And in that, they can make any sound they want. So if you're questioning whether or not a incorporeal being can make a sound, absolutely they can make sounds. They just don't do it in any way that we would know how to do.
Right.
It is interesting, as JT pointed out, that the cats didn't wake up.
Yeah.
If the cats didn't wake up, that means that it probably happened on a plane that the cats were not attuned to, which could mean that the spirits themselves were communicating with you directly through a plane that you and your husband both were inhabiting, or through whatever emotional, spiritual connection you might have had. That was where the spirit was kind of operating out of. And then the third question, which I think is, it's weird because we kind of touched on this. The living absolutely can haunt the living. You can haunt yourself. And we keep talking about a haunting of a place that you used to live. But the truth of the matter is, if you are sitting here really hardcore thinking about something in the past, you could be influencing that past. Your presence could be implanted into that past through your earnest obsession with that time. Time is a really wonky creation, and it doesn't really adhere to any rules. The rules that we define for time are so tenuous. So if I stand here and obsess over a period of my life, and I use the word obsess, I mean, just think about a time in my past, I could conceivably be bothering a past version of myself. I can think of many times in my young childhood when I was in my bedroom and there was something in the corner in my mind, in my imagination, and it's very possible that it was me because I think about that a lot. I think about the times that I was really scared and how, nothing came of those times. But if I'm thinking about it now, could it be that I was planting it back then? Because time is not cause and effect linear. That is an illusion because we're trying to define existence and we put it in that order. So you can upset the way that time is perceived, and you can do weird things with time, which is how people have premonitions and how people can see events before they happen. All these things, it's because time just is, and we as human beings, we work so hard to define it. And in that definition, we put it in this linear line, this happens and then this happens. But the truth is, it all happens. If it happened, it's happening. If it's going to happen, it has happened. So the fact that we choose to experience it this way does not change the fact that everything that is, has been, and will be. It's just a really bizarre thing to say.
Yeah, it's very existential, but, on a totally separate, non-question response, just reading about what you were experiencing, to me it feels like you had multiple spirits on that property that did different things. And I would actually really enjoy, if you're comfortable ever telling the story about what was happening with your child, what he was experiencing, if from your own recollection, because I know you said that he doesn't remember. But just that story about the creature, man, person thing.
That seems to require, and that creature screaming on the lawn, that falls into so many folklore laws, because generally, evil entities cannot gain access to your home. You need to invite it in. It has to be invited into your home in order to have any dominion in your home. So to hear about a story about something outside really wanting in, or really wanting something from the inside of the house, that falls into so much folklore. We could go down a long list of entities and creatures that require your permission to interfere with your life,
especially in the area that your house was.
Area, absolutely.
Yeah. But on the other side, I do think if we're just going to go paranormal, because like Chris said, I mean, of course, things could be wonky, remotes and whatever, totally plausible. But if we're going on a paranormal front, that feels like a totally separate entity, because I feel like the communicating through lights, especially when arguments are happening or what have you, that's the best way for that spirit to communicate, to be like, hey, settle down, whatever it is. But also that same entity could be the one that's communicating through the lights as well as making noises, which again would put that in a little bit more of a poltergeist type entity, which does not mean that it's malevolent. It's just a noisy ghost, as literally the name entails.
Exactly.
But, so that, which would make sense why it was trying to communicate in those certain ways, especially because it doesn't seem like you were generally afraid of that particular entity. But really fascinating stories. And if you have any more from that house, please feel free to send them in.
Yes, please.
I'd love to hear about especially the lawn ghost. But moving on to our next story. So thank you again, Pam. But this one comes from another parajunkie. This one is Lorenzo. And Lorenzo has sent in some other stories.
Ultra parajunkie.
Yes, ultra parajunkie Lorenzo. Lorenzo has sent in other stories in the past from his childhood specifically. And these are a couple stories from an apartment that he lived in as of recently. So they are kind of broken into different separate occurrences, it looks like. So the first one is titled Apartment 31 Introduction. At this point in my life, I'm 21 to my current age of 22. I'm married with one child. My wife despises everything to do with the unknown, yet she tolerates my curiosity because it is yet to kill me. Fair enough.
Fair enough.
My apartment is a duplex. For those who don't know what a duplex is, it's 2 apartments that share a wall. As you can guess, it's not very big. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, maybe 800 square feet. When you walk in the door, you immediately enter the living space. To the left of the entrance, past the living room, is the kitchen, which has the back door on the back left side of the kitchen. If instead of left, you went right from the entrance, you would end up in sort of an intersection of rooms. Straight ahead would be the bathroom, and to the right would be both of the bedrooms. The left would be the office, the right would be our bedroom. I hope that paragraph made any lick of sense to anyone. ADHD brains go wild sometimes, LOL. So that's just the introduction to give you the lowdown, I guess. But apartment 31, it mimics. I cannot tell you the exact date of when it started, but I can tell you that it was fleeting glances. I opened the fridge and saw my wife walk by. I said something along the lines of, "Hey, babe," only to be met with silence. When I turned around, she wasn't there. I shrugged it off and thought she must have been in a hurry to get back to our daughter. At another point, I was in the shower. I heard my wife yell my name, not in an "help me, I am dying" manner, more of a "where is X, Y, or Z?" I stepped out of the shower to open the door and ask what she needed. But she walked into the living room and looked at me as if my face was green. I asked, "What's up? What's wrong?" My wife responded with the good old, "I didn't call for you. Quit messing around." This may seem insignificant, but the name calling in each other's voices happened on a semi-regular basis, along with the infamous triple knocks on door, things being knocked over and thrown, and footsteps outside of the windows, only for no one to be anywhere when I would check. Apartment 31, the toy doesn't like it when we fight. The missus and I do not proclaim to have a perfect relationship. As per every relationship, there will be arguments. One will say something they don't mean, and the other will respond defensively. It's not a couple's proudest moment, but the healing and bonding that hopefully happens after is beautiful. My mother gave my daughter one of those toy cars that a kid can sit in. It was old, but still worked. My daughter loved it. 1-year-olds tend to like any toy that will make noise and annoy an adult. Absolutely. As most toys end up, the car was forgotten outside. During a dispute, we were stopped dead in our tracks by some familiar melodies. The melody ceased as soon as we did. The second that one of us made a sound, so would the melody. Curious to find out what it could mean, I investigated. Man, I would be dead so many times over if this were a movie. To my dismay, outside the front door was the toy car. Lights on and the melody cheerfully beeping along. Which is frightening because that toy has been out there for months through all sorts of Midwestern weather. I went outside, pressed the button, and nothing. No matter how hard I pressed, how many I pressed, it wouldn't make a peep. Dead battery? Probably. Creepy as heck? Definitely. That toy has not made a single noise in the weeks that it had been out there. The toy was bone dry and all. Even if it was a coincidence, at least it stopped our argument. And then I believe there's a couple more stories from this apartment, but this next one's called The Hand. Being kicked to the couch while the wife sleep trains the baby was so fun. I love nothing more than to sleep on the uncomfortable, not long enough fake leather couch, not to mention that it would bake me alive. But little did I know I would soon come to wish that these were the only problems. If I wasn't on a couch, you'd think I was wrestling a croc with how much I was tossing and turning on that couch. I haven't gotten an ounce of sleep. I was sweating bullets and I had to use the bathroom. The perfect formula for a great night's rest. At some point, I managed to roll on my side to face the back of the couch and managed to close my eyes for a little, only to feel an ice-cold hand grab my shoulder with so much force I could make out each finger. I felt warm air kiss my ear, followed by the booming voice of a woman shouting, "Wake up now!" I bolt up and immediately turn on the lights. I'm shaking at this point. There is no one around me. Both doors are locked and the windows are locked. And my wife and daughter are still asleep. Nothing. I've already struggled with falling asleep and staying asleep. This didn't help. I am one of the unfortunate souls who don't always dream. 9 out of 10 times, it's just pitch black, and then boom, my alarm for work goes off, or it's my daughter climbing on me, and that wakes me up. Be it a weird dream, nightmare or sleep paralysis, it was very real for me. I can no longer sleep in big open spaces. That night haunts me to this day. I know it sounds stupid and irrational, but I can't get over it. And then this last one is titled, It Followed Me to Work. The time was about 11:30 a.m. I was looking forward to lunchtime. Oh, I am a press brake operator for a metal factory. I put metal into a machine that bends the material. I know, super fascinating. My machine has 2 metal arms attached to it that help with the weight of some of the pieces that I work with. One of the arms can be faulty, so I have to fix them from time to time. That day was one of those times. I was on one knee tightening a bolt when I noticed a shadow behind me. I figured it was my supervisor checking in to see if I needed help. I didn't pay much attention to him, figuring he'd kneel beside me to ask if it did come It did come up beside me, but there was no color to it, just the absence of it. My whole body had goosebumps. I felt my hair standing on end. I looked at my right to see it knelt beside me. Pure nothingness, the emptiness where eyes should be shot through me. Malice, hate. The only thing I can compare it to was an apex predator looking down on me. This all took place in a matter of seconds. But to me, it was an eternity. Again, real or not, it burned into my eyes. I'm sorry for the overly drawn out email. I know I sound crazy. I know. Most people will think it's made up. There's nothing I can do aside from promising that this stuff is real as you or me. Did it make me a believer? No. But I do believe that the brain is so powerful and has weird ways of portraying how one feels or ways of protecting itself. So if anything, take this for what it is, a good story at my expense. Stay spooky, y'all. Ultra Para Junkie Lorenzo.
Noise.
I feel
Those are great.
It is.
Yeah.
I feel like this was a series of occurrences that led up to that form of content or contact outside of your home.
It was a snowball effect. It was
Right.
something that was gaining more and more strength, more and more power. Absolutely. I mean, that's what it sounds like.
Right.
When you hear the narrative from something that is calling names, presenting itself, ingratiating itself, becoming a part of your day-to-day existence, and then becoming more potent as its own self. Because that's another interesting thing about mimics that people don't. Because there are mimics that their entire existence is mirroring. That's what they are. That's all they are. This was not that. This sounds like something that was using mimicry to get enough energy to then present itself as itself. Meaning that it was so weak that all it could manage was mimicry. But as time went on, it was able to reach out and grab you with a frozen hand, use its own voice to tell you to wake up. That kind of notion suggests that you're dealing with an entity that's building up power, building up strength, and to be present outside of its quote-unquote home. Where was it? Well, it sounds like it's attached to you. Mm-hmm. It is not deriving its energy from where you live. It's not the apartment itself. It sounds like it is something that is attached to you and thereby getting stronger and stronger as time goes on. And that lives in that perfectly arguable world of your imagination can solidify a lot of your fears, stresses, anguishes. They can become a narrative that you're telling yourself, and then you find yourself witnessing and seeing and experiencing these things. And that becomes a question for another day, of course. But there is this one notion, and I talk about this a lot, which is how people dismiss ghost stories because they're not quote-unquote true. They say that without the history, that the ghost story doesn't exist. There is an entire realm that is believing is seeing, not seeing is believing. Which came first, the ghost or the ghost story? A ghost story paints a picture that can come to life. A ghost story molds an entity's shape that energies can go into. So a lot of the time, we spend our times kind of denying things and shuffling them off to our wildest imaginations. And our wildest imaginations are a dangerous place for an entity to just have free reign.
Right.
If you dismiss an energy in your life to your imagination, it will come back with some pretty fierce and scary things. That is where the scariest of the demons that plague us come from. They come from the place where we diminish its existence, but still feed it.
Right.
We're still feeding it all this fear. And it goes through our mind and finds those deep, dark corridors and finds the thing that we harbor somewhere inexplicable in our minds and inhabit it. And then you have to deal with that because we're not dealing with it as it comes and as it happens. And we never tell the story where we vanquish the ghost. We only tell the story of the ghost tormenting and winning.
Yeah.
It feels like, too, the attachment side, if this was chronological, of course, I feel like the attachment might have happened when it first made that contact with you, which was how it was able to follow you to work.
Because it touched you.
Right. And that's intense. That's a very strong thing for a spirit to do because, like Chris has said in the past, like spirits don't have bones and hands, real, physical hands. So for it to be solid enough to have you be able to make out every single finger, that's a lot for a spirit. And that's a lot of energy for it to expend in general. So it's very possible it just could have been holding out for this moment, accumulating for that moment, and
feeding off of all the
right
stresses and angers and anguishes that come with a new family. The emotional roller coaster that is an infant. All those things, when you pile them into the generator of supernatural encounters, it's like, that's a lot of energy. That's a lot of power. That's a lot of our mental and physical strength being zapped upon by an entity that at best can sound like you or your wife, but over time can form a hand out of nothing and create a shadowy figure out of thin air.
I completely agree. But yeah, it's a fascinating story nonetheless. And I know you sent this a while back, Lorenzo, but I wonder, or also Lorenzo, I don't know if you're in the chat right now, but
I haven't seen him.
Yeah, if I'd love to know if you've had any more experiences since that one at your job, because I feels like that is like a big breaking point moment, in just like a story arc sort of way. But
right, yeah.
It's
we will tend to break things down into stories because they make defining things a lot easier. But just because we put them in a story format doesn't mean that's how it's happening. It just means how we're interpreting things.
Yeah. So I'd love to know if you have had any more experiences with this particular entity, because if it is an attachment, that's not going to be the last time you're going to experience.
And it will probably become bolder.
Right.
Because if it's visiting you outside of the home, in a place where everybody is buzzing about, at work and things like that, you are dealing with a pretty bold phenomenon.
Which honestly, it makes a lot of sense. It would show up at work in a place where it sounds like you're working, because you're working in a factory, a place that has a lot of machinery that it can pull the energy from.
Oh, absolutely.
Also people around you. So, very fascinating though, Lorenzo. So yeah,
keep us posted.
I know you usually show that for live streams and stuff like that. So even if you just want to put it in the chat there, I would like to know some more information. But next one comes from Emma. And this one was entitled Something Smelly in the Woods Behind My House.
We got this one, and I was like, I can't wait till this one comes up.
Right? Exactly.
I'm like, what's smelly?
What's smelly?
JT does love his smelly things out in the wilderness.
It's true. It's true.
So it starts with, hey, y'all. Let me just start off by saying I am a huge fan. Been listening to as much of your stuff as I can since I found your channel a few months ago. My sister and I are planning a trip to Savannah for October, so we will be going to by the Savannah Underground.
Oh, nice.
Very exciting.
Woo-woo.
October is a fun time to be in Savannah, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Also, go Knowles. So there you go.
All
Might be a
right.
tender subject right now.
Right. Yeah, as of right now. But
Hey, you know what? That's all right.
I mean, it's not like they got spanked or anything. It's just
anyways, let me get into the story. So for some context, we live in North Georgia in Woodstock, so outside of Atlanta. And one of my kitties had gotten out of the house a couple days ago and hasn't been home yet. We have been all over Kingdom Come looking for him and are starting to worry, as he is an outside cat and has been gone for before, but not this long. My husband and I went to go night fishing at our neighborhood pond last night, which backs up to a big patch of woods with some trails. I immediately felt sort of heavy and something sort of heavy and big. Someone is watching us vibes as soon as we walked back up to the dock. I was scanning the woods the entire time we were down there, about 10 minutes, and saw nothing and heard nothing except crickets and frogs. After about 10 minutes of not really getting any hits, we both decided it was time to go. As we get on the trail to go back up the hill to our neighborhood, we hear a very faint mew, meow, meow sound coming from the woods. We both looked at each other and thought, could that be the cat? So we walked back towards the woods and kept hearing it about 20 seconds between each mew. That might, I add, sounded the exact same every time we heard it.
that's unsettling.
Yeah.
No change in pitch or volume like an animal would that is trying to get your attention. It also had an echo that made it sound like it was coming from the entire woods and not the left or right side.
Damn.
That's that's super creepy. I will also reiterate, we were there for 10 minutes and didn't hear a thing till we started to leave. Me being the dumb and confident scary movie character I am said, well, what if it's the cat? We should help. And the moment I took one more step further than my husband towards the woods, it hit me. The smell of rot.
Oh.
Oof.
A smell so rotten, it felt like it burned my nostril hairs. I have 2 cats and a dog, so I am used to smells, and this was awful. My husband looks at me and was like, do you smell that? I looked at him with eyes that screamed, let's go now. And we turned tail and started walking back. As we started walking faster away, the mew sound grew as if the prospective animal, in quotes, was right behind us, getting louder and louder than it was when we were closer to the woods. My husband kept saying, what is that? What is that? I just said, don't talk and don't turn around till we get home. When we made it home, my husband just looked at me and was so confused. He is by no means a paranormal or supernatural person, for the exception of being a Christian. We talked about how I had felt watched the whole time we were out there, and he said him too. He just thought because it was the night, he was on edge. He knows that I like all the spooky stuff and kept asking me what I thought it could have been, and I have no idea. So I was like, oh, well, I will just send to my podcast. I like...
Let them answer it.
Exactly. Maybe they will have an answer. And here we are. It was an encounter that was maybe 3 minutes long, but it felt like 30. I went back this morning just in case it could have been the cat. I walked through the entire area calling his name, but no mew. I didn't see a doe, I did see a doe, which was pretty cool, but not what I was looking for. As I started to leave once again, I smelled the rot for a split second and it went away.
Oh.
I searched high and low, and there was no dead animal anywhere. Thanks for reading, and any insight would be much appreciated.
Damon.
Hold on. I don't know if there is any history to the land or anything like that, but the whole thing was just very bizarre, and I don't think...
North Georgia?
Yep, Woodstock area.
Sure.
And I don't think we will be night fishing anytime soon, Emma.
Dang. Man, them North Georgia woods, man.
That's
They got
super
some
creepy.
stuff up in
So, yeah. Rotting smells and things watching you.
Demon.
Wendigo.
Oh, yeah.
The Wendigo hunts.
That's not the area for Wendigo, right?
So we use the term Wendigo. Wendigo is definitely a far north thing, but Wendigo as an entity, the actual entity, is universal in so many different ways. So what a Wendigo is in its true definition form is pretty Canadian border area kind of thing, but throughout the indigenous populations, there are versions of the creature in question. In Cherokee, I think it might be called the Ni. But because of the way that we talk, when we say Wendigo, what we're talking about is an entity that has eaten human flesh and thereby becomes obsessed with it. And they are ferocious hunters. And oftentimes they use mimicry and other ways to pull you off the path. And so even like the look behind is a version of this kind of hunting entity. It stays in the shadows, it stays in the woods. The fact that you can smell it brings about a very demonic edge to it. But the idea that it was using a sound that it thought would draw you,
that sounds look behind you.
brings the idea of you're being hunted.
Exactly.
And in that hunt capacity, because that's the difference between, like, one of the things about demons don't want to kill you. They want to tempt you. They want to turn you. They want to make you corrupt. Whereas the other entities want to eat you, want to kill you. You know, they're hoping that you'll come out so they can feast on you. So there's that. I'm also very concerned about your cat.
Right.
There was no resolution for the cat.
So
is the cat okay? Did you find the cat?
Yeah.
Here's what I think is. I think it might be a look behind that took your cat as bait.
Yeah. That's the kind of thing that it feels like. It feels like a
and then was like, meow.
like you're being hunted. It was the sensation I got was you're dealing with a hunting spirit, and I think that region would have had some Cherokee influence, certainly.
Oh yeah.
And I'm sorry if I'm butchering the indigenous lore because I don't know it right off. Trisha says,
I've experienced what I call ether noise.
Ether noise, sure.
It's incredibly freaky and frustrating because every time I walk towards the sound, it never gets closer. Hope this makes sense.
So maybe something like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and so that's an interesting point too, was in the story that we just heard, the sound seemed to come from everywhere. So it's trying to pull you further into and away from the safety of your home, the safety of known areas, drawing you into the dark.
Trail and,
taking you off the trail. And again, we have those. Every time we have an entity that we try to categorize, it's like, well, you know, every specific group has a different name and a different but there is an overriding, like, this is an evil meat-eating entity versus an entity that's trying to corrupt you. And that's where I generally draw the difference between demonic and these kinds of primal entities.
They're like malevolent entities.
Right,
They're not
malevolent.
straight demonic.
Not
but
straight
they're
demonic
malevolent.
and again, not being like not adhering solely to like a Christian notion of demon. The demon, certainly of Christianity and most organized religions, its goal is not to kill you, but to turn you evil.
Yeah.
To make you do evil things.
Yeah.
Like, it would be more likely that a demon would make you kill someone else than it would be to kill you. Mm-hmm. So, those become the interesting things. And the fact that there are two of you, it's possible that it was a demon trying to pull you in so that it would get one of you to kill the other.
Yeah.
That kind of action does make sense. However, there's a lot of elements to it that just sound like, oh, yeah, you're dealing with something that's hunting you. And the reason why it smells like rotting flesh is because it is imbued with rotting flesh, because it is a creature of rot.
Well, and especially because you were saying as you were continuing forward and ignoring it, it got louder and more intense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it
was like frustrated.
Yeah, it was frustrated that you weren't still coming.
Yeah,
and
that's a good point, Maddie.
If you hear a sound, no, you didn't. that is the general rule of all of Appalachia.
Yeah.
If you heard a sound, no, you didn't. If somebody called your name, no, it didn't.
So one of our most popular videos is when we talked about the look behind, and it's a YouTube short. It's got hundreds of thousands of views and a bunch of likes on YouTube, and every comment that comes in is from some country dude that's like, well, I have my Ruger on me if that's gonna happen. Nope, 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 nope. And I'm just like, nah, dog, this is not something you can shoot.
And that's just it. That's the bread and butter of the look behind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
is the hubris of man.
Yeah.
It's the hubris of someone who says, I can handle it. Because, come on out. Come handle it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Draw it out. Because when we ignore it, it has very little resources. When we feed into it, especially aggressively, if we aggressively feed it, push aggression out there, you know what comes back? Aggression. It's a very dangerous balance that we have going on with the supernatural, because by its very definition, it's not quote unquote real. That puts it in a very dangerous category.
Yeah.
The unreal means it does not have to adhere to intimidations that we can do, to any fear that we could apply to it. It's unreal. And so when people are telling you, don't worry, that's not real, what they're really saying is, I will not spend any time trying to identify it.
Sure.
And for the longer it has no direct definition, it can be anything.
So when it comes to these entities, these malevolent entities that people experience more commonly than other entities, for instance, the hag being one of the most experienced entities in the world, and then also you have the Wendigo, that many people have said they've experienced. Those were two things that were living at one point. Do y'all think that the look behind what is something that was possibly living and now just chooses to be that malevolent spirit? Or do you think that it's just something that, came to be as a look behind?
So the look behind actually is very closely related to Fey lore. Mm-hmm. It exists beyond our own reckoning of when stories really happened.
Okay.
Because our notion of the woods being a dangerous place, and the big bad wolf. I mean, that's a perfect example. The big bad wolf was designed to keep kids from playing into the deep woods because the wolf will get them and eat them. Now, what we've learned over time is wolves generally don't. Wolves generally don't attack people. They don't generally make off and maraud and kill people. Something was.
Yeah.
And it's very likely that it was just sick human beings, because humans are the worst. And so there's a possibility that the big bad wolf, quote unquote, big bad wolf, was a way to warn people of a danger that they just didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
But that's the look behind too. It's a danger that we just don't know what it is. And when you hear more and more stories about the look behind, there are all kinds of myths and legends that kind of fill in the blanks of the look behind.
Sure.
And you're like, oh, okay. So in Appalachia, they just determined, don't pay it no mind, and it won't hurt you. Which is a fascinating thing, because that doesn't make sense. If you ignore the bear that's charging on you, it's still going to eat you.
Yeah.
So what is this rule? How did it come to be? And that's
You have to acknowledge it.
Exactly. You have to give it credence. And it comes back to that one interesting rule. You have to grant it permission into your life.
Like a vampire.
You can't let a vampire into your house. And you know how you let a look behind into your house? You acknowledge it.
You look behind.
You look behind. You acknowledge it. When you acknowledge it, you are inviting it to engage with you.
It's true.
So if you hear it, no, you didn't, means don't accept it into your life. Ignorance can protect you in this stance.
And the fact that it was like mewing, and it was the same mew.
The
every
same
single time.
mew, yeah.
Right.
It had one. It had
One
one,
trick.
One
sound.
sound.
effect.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So, Maddie, what do you think, Maddie, about my question? Like, if a look behind was ever living, do you?
No, I don't think that because there are a lot of different entities that never had to be human to exist. And even a hag is questionable if that was ever even a person. Because if anything, they fall into more of a shapeshifter sort of mode where
Hags and skinwalkers share a lot of similarities when it comes down to it, because hags will oftentimes in stories wear the skin of people to look like your wife, look like your family member. So
that's so creepy.
It is so creepy. and that is not an isolated story of the entity that wears the skin.
Yeah.
Like it peels its skin at night, and then you take the skin, you throw it in the fire, and that's how you get rid of it. You know, things like that.
Yeah.
Those stories go so far back, but why?
Right.
Why are there so many stories from very disjointed sources that suggest that there are creatures that wear human skin to fool you, but when they need to present themselves, they peel the skin off, and it's just in a pile in the corner. And that is a classic hag story. You know, the classic hag story is the man who married a beautiful woman, but at night she peels off her skin and rides him, and he gets weaker and weaker over the course of time. Sure. And then one morning he wakes up, or in the middle of the night, he wakes up and he sees a pile of skin on the ground. And you're like, oh, no. And it's like, oh, okay. That's interesting because it does. It lives in the shapeshifter attitude more than any other. Like when you start to really pull the lore together, you're like, oh, I get that she steals the essence, very succubus behavior. But the fact that she can disguise herself as a human is really where you start to go, oh, you know what? That falls into like all these lycanthropy stories, all these stories, the changeling stories, skinwalker stories, because skinwalkers too are capable of changing their shape, and a lot of people don't acknowledge that part of its lore is that a skinwalker can walk around during the day looking like anybody, and then at night when they pull off their skin. I don't know that we've ever said this on this podcast. They look like cats. They're like cat people. They have cat-like features, which is fascinating when it comes down to it. You know that they have some kind of feline,
Vibe.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I don't think that it's like, I don't think it was ever human, especially because I agree with Chris that it feels much more akin to a fae, because there are plenty of entities that have been categorized in paranormal study, if you will, that didn't need to ever exist on a human plane. I think that comes from the idea that humans are frightened by things that could hurt them, because humans have a concept that we are an apex predator.
Right.
And it's like, how could something hurt an apex predator? You know?
And that comes into that notion of the aboriginal, or the indigenous, because the indigenous and the aboriginal groups of any continent or place, they adhere very strongly to a sense of nature having forces to repel us.
Sure.
You know, they recognize the darkness of the forest. They recognize the dangers of certain areas. They stay away from certain areas because in their experience, that is where the energy is very strong. And that becomes the lore of each locality. And you'll hear time and time again, like if you listen to a lot of Native American lore, they will talk about little people, and they will talk about other planes of existence. first world, second world, third world. They will talk about all of these other places that spirit entities can take you, and you can live for an indeterminate amount of time. And then it's like, oh well, if I looked over in Europe, same exact thing. Yep. Little people, planes of existence, fey powers that pull you into different realms and worlds. And it's like, how is this happening with such a divide of belief and structure? How is it that every culture on the face of the earth recognizes minuscule magical humans? If you go to China, you will find minuscule magical humans or human-esque beings.
Sure.
If you go into Africa, you'll find minuscule magical human beings, which begs the question, how did that come to be? How is it that all these cultures, these disparate cultures, have the same weird hang up with tiny people?
So I was just gonna say, like, just bringing it back to her story in particular. If it is a look behind, do y'all think that like it's still out there?
Oh yeah, I mean,
absolutely.
They tend to have territories.
How do you lure one? Like some ears of corn or something?
I'm sorry. How do you lure
one?
one?
To the tree line. Yeah, I'd probably cook some corn and just like put it out there.
It's not a deer.
I don't know. Something I thought.
You're far more likely with like red meat on a stick.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, it's yeah, I want to say that most entities in that realm kind of have a territory that they
absolutely
look after, if you will, or lurk in. I don't think you should be going out with your fishing hook with a meat on it.
With a meat.
With a meat.
You do not have a meat on the hook.
But
go fish for a look behind.
Well, you find in so many cultures too are the baby stealers.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that has to do a lot with like infant mortality. The idea that something comes and takes the babies, but every culture has one. And it's that kind of thing where I honestly think if you wanted to, this is such a bad thing to say out loud, but I'm going to.
Nice.
If you wanted to find one of these entities, one of the best ways to do it is to go out into the woods and pretend you're looking for something. Ooh. Shout out as if you're looking for something. Shout out to a name. You can shout out to a pet. Shout out. Continually walk around in circles yelling for something. Or actually, someone would be the best thing. Because if the entity is there, it will assume the identity of the thing you're looking for. And then you've basically set the trap in the other direction. You're trying to draw it out. Give it a test. See if you can create a rapport with the entity by pretending to have lost something. And in your loss, it thinks it can trap you.
Ooh.
This is a terrible idea. Please don't do it. But for the sake of scientific query, it could be a way to test like your cabin in North Carolina. If we went out there and we went out into the woods and we just started calling for somebody, we could conceivably over time start getting responses.
You probably would. Them woods got some stuff in it.
Well, and that's the intriguing thing
in the middle of nowhere.
If these creatures adhere to the lore, because the lore becomes their law.
Yeah.
Whether they existed before the lore or not is anyone's guess, but the fact that they exist at all suggests that they would fall for the trick.
Interesting. So if you went out in the middle of the woods, you called for something, you found it, could you put a blindfold on and then turn around towards it? Like, what are the rules here?
So that's an excellent question. We're playing the Gremlins game.
Yes.
Yeah. What if we fed it on the plane and it's after midnight on the East Coast, but it's that notion. It isn't seeing it; it's looking for it.
Oh, okay.
Somebody recently on TikTok, I think, was saying, could a vampire come into your house with a warrant, a search warrant? Like if a vampire was a cop, and he had a police warrant, he'd have permission to come into your house, right?
That's permission.
But it isn't permission to come into your life. People forget that what the contract is your willingness to engage with the spirit.
Right.
So just showing up looking for it is an invitation. It doesn't matter whether you're blindfolded. It doesn't matter anything like that. You are engaging with the spirit. It is the...
yeah, makes sense.
If you've ever seen the movie Hellraiser 2.
Bruh.
In Hellraiser 2...
In space.
In Hellraiser 2, there's a puzzle box. If you're not familiar with the storyline, there's a puzzle box that will bring about tormentors from hell. They give the puzzle box to kind of an autistic child to solve. The autistic child solves the puzzle box, and the tormentors show up. But when they show up, they don't take the child who opened the box because he says, hands do not call us. Intention calls us. The man who put the puzzle in the child's box was the one who actually opened it, who actually wanted to open it. You know, desire is what draws them. So you can't trick a spirit in that fashion, but you can lure a spirit, but don't expect a good outcome.
Right.
Yep.
Well, and I think that's the reason why there isn't further explanation, because those who did find out aren't here to tell the tale.
Oh, boy.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah,
And
absolutely.
so-
no, that's exactly it. Is like
That's
those
why
who
we
did
don't
find-
get specificity.
That's why we don't get any
So-
specificity. That's a good point, babe.
EO
Straight up.
Serenity is like, no, thank you, Chris. How about we put a tape voice recording and leave it there with a camera watching? That's a great idea, but again, it's not the device. It's
The engagement.
It's the engagement. It's the human energy. People underestimate how incredibly valuable human attention is and how absolutely delectable we are to these.
Succulent.
Yeah, they really want to chew on us. So you can put a recorder down. It doesn't have the same effect as your physical presence and your physical, you manifesting this engaged conversation with them.
Yeah. What if we put a phone out there, put it on speaker, and spoke to them through the phone?
Still
They might
not,
show up in your house.
Yeah.
Also,
exactly
still
Although
not
that's a
giving off.
great horror movie premise, by the
Right?
way. People trying to trick these entities by putting a phone out, and then and then it just shows up behind them in the house.
Oh, yeah.
Or trapping them in the phone.
You're right. Trapping them in the phone.
But okay, well, on that tangent, if you will, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up today, y'all. But thank you so much for listening to this episode. And thank y'all so much to everybody who sent in ghost mail. Yes, so if you have a ghost story that you would like to send in to us, you can send it at ghostmail@hauntedcitypodcast.com. We now have an automated message that will let you know that we received it. Because we do go in order of the ghost mails as they come in. So if it's been a little bit since we've read since you sent your email and we hadn't read it yet, just know we will get to it. But we got to rotate through all of the lovely stories y'all are sending in. So, yes, and we love hearing all of the details and all that jazz.
Yes.
So please.
Do not never apologize for writing something long. Something long gives us more to think about and more to digest and comment on. And you never, ever have to say, you might think I'm crazy. We will never think you're crazy. Just know that this is the place where people who have stories that they say, I can't tell anywhere else, you can tell us.
Yeah, and we will give it our best effort at trying to dissect them.
Amen.
Yes.
So, so thank you guys so much for listening again, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day whenever you're listening to this. My name is Madison Timmons,
I'm Chris Susi.
and stay spooky, y'all.